few weeks after Adanas saw the strange black bird, her mysterious sickness returned again. It started subtly. A little tiredness in the morning, a small headache that wouldn't go away, a strange pain that crept into her bone no matter how warm the weather. At first, Adana ignored it. She had survived worse. But within a week, she couldn't deny it. Her hands trembled when she lifted Emika. Her feet felt heavy walking up the stairs. Her voice sometimes disappeared mid-sentence. And most terrifying of all the dreams returned. Dark ones. She saw shadows crawling through her room at night. She saw the bush again, where her pain began. She saw a figure with no face, whispering her name over and over like a warning. When she woke up, she'd be drenched in sweat breath, short, heart racing, her baby crying in the next room like he saw it too. Jonathan was the first to notice the change. "Are you okay, Ada?" he asked one morning, watching her push her food around. She nodded quickly. "I'm fine, just tired." But he didn't believe her. Cynthia, too, saw it. The way her once glowing daughter now looked pale. Her once bright eyes dimmed. They called in doctors. Tests were run. Blood. MRI. Scans. Nothing. Medically. She was healthy, but Adana knew what it was. Deep down, she knew. The curse hadn't left. It had waited, silently and patiently. And now, it had returned stronger when they didn't expect. A week later, her phone lit up. A message entered from a number she had blocked. "You know what to do. Reunite with your family. Ask for forgiveness. You want to live, don't you?" She deleted the message. Another one came the next day. "We warned you. No one leaves their blood behind and escapes untouched." She dropped her phone, her hands shaking. Sam picked it up. "What is it?" She said nothing. How could she explain that the people who once left her to starve were now asking for peace only because she had something they wanted? Then came the worst night. She collapsed while brushing her hair. Her breath stopped. Sam caught her just before she hit the floor. By the time she opened her eyes again, she was back in the hospital. This time, even her doctors looked afraid. "Your organs are not shutting down," one said, "but your body behaves like it is." That evening, Adana made a decision. She wore her black gown and flat shoes, covered her hair in a simple scarf, called for her driver. "I'm going to my uncle's house," she said quietly. Cynthia stood. "Are you sure?" Jonathan clenched his jaw. "Do you want us to come?" "No," Adana said. "This, I must do alone." She arrived at Uncle Ben's compound as the sun was going down. The gate was rusty, the building worn out. When he opened the door and saw Herthin, sweating, sick, he grinned. "I told you," he said. "Blood is blood." Adana didn't smile. She stepped forward, eyes fierce, despite her weakness. "I came, not to beg." He paused. "I came to tell you, I will never need you. Not yesterday, not today, not ever." He frowned. "You'll die if you don't listen. I'd rather die in pain than live with people who watched me suffer and did nothing." She turned to Aunt Margaret, who stood at the back. You told people I slept with boys. You spread the lies. And now you want me to come back and build your houses? You want to eat the food of the same hands you starved?" They said nothing. "You cursed me," Adana said. "But I'm not afraid of curses anymore. Because the same God who gave me a second life will give me healing." Then she turned and walked out. That night, she cried on her pillow. Her body shook with fever, but as the tears soaked the sheets, she felt a strange warmth in her chest. The next morning, she woke up stronger. She stood. She walked to the bathroom without help. The nurse gasped. "You look different." Adana nodded slowly. "I feel different." Days passed, then weeks, and she began to heal. Her skin brightened. Her appetite returned. She gained weight again. Even the doctors were stunned. "This is impossible," one whispered. "Whatever it was, it's gone." Adana called for a meeting. Jonathan, Cynthia, Sam. She stood in front of them, wearing a sky-blue gown. "I know what healed me," she said. "Not just prayers, not medicine." She paused. It was Mercy. They looked confused. I needed to go back. Not to them, but to those who are now where I once was. She looked at Jonathan. Daddy, I went to the streets, to the markets, to the bridges. I helped the beggars, the dying mothers, the forgotten children, because when you lift someone in pain, you lift yourself too. This is what healed me. Jonathan's eyes welled with tears. Cynthia couldn't control her tears. Sam placed a hand on her back. You've always been amazing, he said. 3 months later, Adana launched the Emeka Foundation in memory of her son and father. She returned to her childhood village not to stay, but to change it. She built a free medical care center where no one would ever be rejected again. The day of the center's opening, the villagers clapped and cried. But her uncles and aunties, they were not invited. She had forgiven them, but she would never empower them. Then one evening, strange news reached the village. The herbalist, one who spoke the Kirsch, had gone to bed and never woke up. They found his body still holding a calabash. No marks, no wounds, just gone. The village elders said it was a silent judgment for his evil. Adanas said nothing. She just held her son Emeka close and whispered, "We rise by lifting others." The story of Adana's healing spread like wildfire. People from nearby towns came to the village just to catch a glimpse of her, the girl who was cursed but lived. Some touched her gown, others whispered prayers in her name. But Adana stayed humble. She never claimed to be powerful. She simply said, "God used pain to show me purpose." The Emeka Foundation Clinic quickly became a beacon of hope. Every day, children came for treatment with no fear of rejection. Mothers who once delivered babies on cold floors now had clean beds. Old women who walked barefoot in pain now had free medication and care. And Adana? She was often there to see the smiles on the faces of the people. She visits the center not as a boss, but as a helper, wearing simple clothes, feeding hungry children, listening to broken stories, and helping them find their purpose in life. Sometimes, she'd walk the streets of the town with a bag of bread and water, sitting beside beggars like she once had beside Jonathan. People offered her gifts. She rejected them all. "Help the next person," she'd say with a smile. But not everyone was happy. Her uncles and aunts watching from a distance still refused to give up. The hate was still burning in their hearts. They burned with jealousy. "She made all this money and still left us behind," one grumbled. "She's selfish," another said. But even the villagers replied, "You had your chance. She needed you, and you walked away. Let her bless those who stood by her." Their words fell like stones on bitter hearts. Meanwhile, Adana's body grew stronger by the day. She gained weight. Her skin glowed. The fear that once lived in her bones vanished completely. Even the nightmares disappeared. She told her doctors, "I don't need follow-up. I've been healed. Fully." They nodded. They knew the truth. There was no medicine for what she had survived, only grace. One weekend, back in Lagos, her adoptive father, Jonathan, sat with her on the rooftop of their Banana Island mansion. He looked at her, eyes full of love and awe. "You know," he said slowly, "sometimes I forget where you came from." Adana laughed. "I never do. It keeps me grounded." He took her hand. "You're the woman your mother and father would have been proud of." She looked down. "I just wish they were here to see it." "They are," Jonathan said, pointing to the sky. "And I think they smile every time you lift someone else." Sam walked in then, carrying little Emeka, now nearly 3, and talking like a parrot. "Mommy, guess what I did?" he shouted. She laughed and scooped him up. He kissed her cheek. "I gave my rice to a boy who had no food. Like you did, Mommy." Her heart melted. Sam said, "He insisted. Said he wants to be like you." Adana looked at her son, her husband, her father, and the home she never imagined having, and she whispered under her breath, "Thank you, God, for everything, even the pain." But not all pain disappears forever. That same night, a quiet knock came on the mansion gate. The guard opened it. An old man stood outside. His clothes were dusty, his eyes tired. He held a small envelope and said, "Give this to Adana. She'll know what it means." Inside the envelope was a photograph, old, torn. It was her father, smiling beside a much younger Uncle Ben, and on the back of the photo, "We buried something she must never find. No return address, no name, just the words." When Adana saw it, her heart stopped. She stared at the photo and whispered, "What did you do to my father?" Adana held the photograph in her trembling hands. Her father's warm smile on the front, the haunting words on the back. "We buried something she must never find." She stared at it for hours that night, sitting alone on her bed, baby Emeka asleep beside her. Sam had tried to ask, but she had waved him off gently. This wasn't something she could explain, not yet. She hadn't seen this photo before. And the handwriting? It wasn't from Uncle Ben. It was from someone else. Someone who knew something and wanted her to know it too. But what had they buried? Where? And why? The next morning, Adana made a quiet call to a private investigator, the same one Jonathan had used when tracking down the source of the curse. "Find out who brought this letter," she said, her voice low. "Find him. I don't care how long it takes." "Yes, Ma," he replied. "I'll start immediately." In the meantime, Adana returned to the village where the Emeka Foundation clinic stood. But something felt different this time. A cold wind swept across the land as if warning her. The villagers whispered more than usual. Something was in the air. One of the elderly women approached her that afternoon. "My daughter," she said carefully, "your father was a good man, but not everyone wanted him to succeed." Adana's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" "There were secrets," the woman said. "Things we were told never to speak of after your parents died. You should ask the land. It remembers." Adana blinked. "Ask the land?" The woman pointed toward the forest trail behind the village school. "Your father used to walk there, every Sunday morning. He always carried a small bag." "Was it a farm path?" Adana asked. "No," she whispered. "He said it was where he buried his insurance. We all thought it was a joke, until the night he died." That night, Adana returned to the spot alone. The trees were quiet, the air too still. She wore boots and carried a torchlight and gloves. She stood at the edge of the forest path, looked up at the sky, and whispered, "Daddy, if you left something for me, show me." She walked deeper into the bush until her torchlight hit a small mound, barely noticeable but newer than the surrounding soil. She stopped, kneeled, and began to dig with her hands. 20 minutes later, she hit something hard. A small steel box, rusted at the corners, sealed with a broken padlock. She opened it. Inside were documents, bank records, property papers, and most shocking of all, a handwritten will. The will was dated 2 months before her parents were murdered. It was clear. Everything, every property, every investment, every kobo was left to Adana. Her father had been planning something. He had feared something. And now she understood. Her uncles hadn't just abandoned her. They had stolen from her. Back in Lagos, Jonathan read the will with a tight jaw. "These documents are legally binding," he said. "And if we check the property names, these were sold years ago. I know some of these lands. They're now luxury estates." Adana's voice cracked. "So all along, I was the rightful owner? Even in my suffering, they were living off my inheritance?" Jonathan nodded. Sam held her hand. "We'll get justice." But Adana shook her head slowly. "I don't want revenge. I want peace. But I will not be silent." She called a press conference. News stations came. Bloggers swarmed the gates of the mansion. In a calm, firm voice, Adana revealed everything. Her background, her abandonment, her recovery, her discovery. She didn't mention names, but she made it clear she knew the truth now. The country buzzed for days. People praised her strength. But behind closed doors, her uncles panicked. And Uncle Ben made one last desperate attempt. He arrived at the clinic gate, sweating, dirty, and kneeling with 2 goats tied to a stick. "I came for peace," he cried. "I was misled. I didn't know the documents were real. Adana walked out slowly. Her staff tried to block her, but she waved them aside. She stood face to face with the man who had let her suffer for years. You didn't come for peace, she said softly. You came for protection. He trembled. Please, I'm sick. I need your help. Adana looked into his eyes. I forgive you, but I can't carry your shame. She turned to her guards. Take him to the clinic. Treat him. Feed him. But when he's strong enough, send him back home. He fell to the ground, sobbing, but she didn't turn around. That night, as she lay beside Sam with baby Emeka sleeping in his cot, she smiled for the first time in weeks. Justice had come, not through court, but through truth. She had been through fire, through betrayal, through curses, through grief. And still, she stood, not broken, but reborn. Outside the window, a soft wind blew across the sea, and Adana whispered into the darkness, I am not what they said I would be. I am everything they feared I'd become. The spotlight was warm, not too harsh, not blinding, just warm enough to reflect the soft gold on Adana's gown as she stood on the presidential podium, the Nigerian flag fluttering gently behind her. Camera flashes popped, crowds clapped, even top government officials whispered her name with admiration. Adana Obinna, daughter of nobody, now the woman the nation couldn't stop talking about. The Minister of Humanitarian Affairs shook her hand and handed her a plaque. In recognition of your tireless efforts in transforming lives through free healthcare, education, and justice, we name you Nigeria's People's Daughter. Tears gathered in Cynthia's eyes as she clapped proudly beside Jonathan. Sam stood tall next to Adana, their son Emeka perched on his shoulders, clapping with the crowd. It was supposed to be the happiest day of her life, but Adana couldn't shake the feeling in her chest. It was tight, heavy, like something was watching. Later that night, the banquet hall at Eco Hotel glittered with soft jazz music, crystal glasses, and luxury gowns. Nigeria's elite had come to celebrate her. Adana, you've done more in 5 years than most NGOs do in 20, one senator said, raising a toast. Your parents would be proud. Adana smiled gently. Thank you, sir. But as she returned to her seat, her eyes caught something strange. A small white envelope had been tucked into her chair, almost hidden beneath her shawl. There was no name on it, just her seat number. She opened it quietly. Inside was a folded sheet of paper, written in a child's messy handwriting. Your father didn't just die. He was silenced. They're watching you now, too. Her hands went cold. She looked around the hall, faces laughing, champagne flowing, but she couldn't see who had left it. Sam leaned toward her. Everything okay? She smiled quickly. Yes, just thinking how it all began. But inside, her heart pounded. That night, back at the mansion in Banana Island, Adana stared at the note under her desk lamp. Her fingers traced the word silenced. Her father's murder had always haunted her. Yes, she knew armed robbers had killed him and her mother. But what if that wasn't the full truth? Her mind replayed all the strange things from the past year. The photo from an anonymous source. The woman in the village who mentioned secrets. The land documents buried near the school path. She walked out to the balcony where the cool breeze met her. The stars twinkled over Lagos. And just then, a black car parked quietly across the street. Windows tinted. Engine still. No one came out. Adana's breath caught. She stepped back slowly and closed the balcony doors. Something was happening. Something bigger than the curse. Bigger than the healing. Bigger than her foundation. The next morning, she met Jonathan in his study. She placed the note gently on his desk. He read it once. His face tightened, and for the first time in a long time, he looked afraid. Where did this come from? He asked. Banquet hall, Adana said. It was dropped on my seat. Jonathan stood and locked the door. Then he walked to his private cabinet and pulled out an old folder. Inside were newspaper clippings, dates, names and diagrams. He placed a photo in front of her. It was her father, standing beside a man in a federal government uniform. This was 2 weeks before the murder, Jonathan said. He was trying to expose something. Something about illegal oil drilling and embezzlement. I only knew part of it. I promised your father I'd protect you if anything happened. I never got to meet you before his death, and fate brought us together on that fateful when you fell on me. Adana's voice was barely a whisper. You think they killed him? Jonathan nodded. And now, you've become just as powerful. Maybe even more. Adana sat back in her chair. The celebration from the day before now felt like a target painted on her chest. They're watching, she whispered. Just like the letter said. Jonathan looked her in the eye. Then we watched back. But Adana knew she's no longer safe. She knew the people who killed her father were after her, and she needed to do something. But what can she possibly do when she doesn't even know who's chasing her? This is no longer about her uncles and aunties in the village. It's about the bigger threat that can consume her completely. Adana's convoy was still a mile away when the driver slowed down. The smell of smoke hit her before she even reached the school gates. In the distance, black smoke curled into the air, rising like a warning into the sky above the small town of Umuchi. Sam leaned forward from the back seat. What is that? Adana's chest tightened. That's the Emeka Junior Academy, the free school she built in her father's village, the one named after her son, the one where hundreds of poor children came to learn every day. The driver sped up. By the time they arrived, the chaos had already begun. The school was burning. Villagers stood around helplessly. Some carried buckets. Others simply wept. Teachers clutched papers and children huddled under trees in tears, watching everything they knew go up in flames. Adana stepped out of the SUV. The crowd parted. She walked forward, slowly, eyes locked on the inferno. Her heels sank into the soft earth. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stared. Sam ran to the school manager. What happened? The woman, covered in ash, shook her head with trembling lips. They came in the night. They poured petrol. They were masked. We couldn't stop them. Adana whispered, Did anyone die? No, thank God, but everything inside is gone. Sam turned to Adana. This wasn't random. I know, she said. Then someone shouted from behind the school wall. Madam, come and see this. Adana rushed forward. On the wall, painted in red, was a single chilling message. Stay silent, or you'll join your parents. The keepers. That night, back in Lagos, Adana called an emergency meeting with Jonathan and Cynthia. She laid the photograph, the anonymous letter, and now a picture of the vandalized school wall side by side on the glass table. They're not just threatening me, she said. They're warning me. Jonathan leaned back, his face cold. The keepers. I've heard whispers. Ex-military. Paid protectors for corrupt elites. They silence people who talk too much. Cynthia whispered. Do you think they were involved with your father's murder? Adana nodded slowly. I'm sure of it now. Sam's voice was tense. Then we need to go to the police. Jonathan shook his head. No, we go higher. Quietly and carefully. But why now? Cynthia asked. Why strike after all these years? Adana looked down at her reflection in the glass. Because I'm close, she whispered. Closer than I've ever been. And they're scared. That weekend, a security drone captured footage of a black van circling the Emeka Foundation's clinic 3 times at night with no plates. 2 guards at the Banana Island mansion were approached with bribes from an unknown caller, and an anonymous account sent Adana an email. We warned you. You're becoming a problem. Back down, or lose more than your school. The keepers. But Adana didn't back down. She flew to Abuja the next week. She met with a senior official at the Anti-Corruption Bureau, an old ally of her father who remembered his case file. She handed him everything she had: documents, photos, and names. If I disappear, she said calmly, release this to every news channel in the country. The man nodded. You have courage. I have memories, Adana replied. That's stronger. Back home, she began installing high-level security at all her facilities. Bodyguards were doubled. Staff were rotated. Cynthia wanted her to lay low. But Adanas started appearing more in public. She gave a televised interview. She released a statement calling for a national reckoning. She said, "We will not let the past destroy our future. This country must face her truth." The country erupted in support. Online hashtags trended, "Justice for Adana. Who killed her father? The keepers must fall." People marched in the streets, and somewhere deep in a quiet part of town, in a dark room, 5 men watched her face on a projector screen. One of them tapped the table slowly. "She talks too much," he said. Another replied coldly, "She has her father's fire." The leader stood, walking toward the screen. "Then let's silence her before it spreads." Rain poured over the rooftop of the Emeka Foundation's Lagos headquarters. Adana stood alone in her private office, watching droplets slide down the glass windows. The city lights flickered in the distance, but her thoughts were buried deep in memories, in questions, in silence. She clutched a brown envelope tightly in her package delivered that morning with no return address. The courier had said it came from someone who wanted the truth to come full circle. Inside it, more old photographs, confidential reports, a map of abandoned oil blocks in the Niger Delta, marked in red ink. But the most chilling item? A scanned letter, signed by her father. "If anything happens to me, it wasn't armed robbers. I have proof. The drilling in Block 19 is illegal. The revenue is being diverted to unnamed accounts. I've hidden the files in the chapel roof. Please protect Adana." Her heart stopped. Block 19. She'd heard whispers about Iton oil-rich zone suddenly shut down by the government after a technical issue, but rumors swirled that millions were still being extracted illegally behind closed doors. And now her father had confirmed it. He knew, and he was killed for it to silence the truth. She rushed out of the office and called Jonathan. He met her that night in a secure suite in Ikoyi, carrying his own black briefcase filled with old oil contracts from nearly 2 decades ago. They laid the documents side by side on the table. Adana circled names, dates, signatures. Jonathan traced the financial transactions. It all pointed to one thing: a secret ring of oil exploitation, hidden beneath fake licenses, protected by elite ex-military, and backed by silent investors. "It's still running," Jonathan whispered. "And the same people are still in power," Adana added. "They just changed names, changed fronts." She paused, then looked him in the eyes. "Daddy, this is what my father died trying to expose." Jonathan nodded slowly. "And now they know you're trying to finish what he started." The next morning, she flew to her hometown. Alone. No convoy, no media, just one trusted driver and an umbrella. She returned to the small village chapel, the same place her parents had worshipped every Sunday before their death. It was nearly abandoned now. She asked the local pastor for a key, claiming she wanted to pray. Once inside, she climbed up the creaky wooden beams toward the old ceiling rafters. Her hands searched above the dusty wooden panels, and then she felt it. A small metal container wedged deep behind a beam. She yanked it out, nearly falling off the ladder. Inside were flash drives, handwritten logs, and receipts. Everything her father had written about the illegal oil operation in Block 19. He had documented names, amounts, meeting dates. One name jumped out at her: Bernard Egbo, a name she had heard recently on the news. Now a federal special projects director under a different alias, but the same face from a photo of her father's funeral. He had attended. He had pretended to grieve. Adana stood frozen in the chapel. Rain dripped from the cracked ceiling. Her hands trembled. Her father had planted the truth like a seed, and now she was holding it. That evening, she returned to Lagos and called a secret board meeting with her legal team, security chief, and the private investigator. "We have enough evidence to shake the foundation of this country," she said. "But if we move too fast, they'll try to bury it. Or bury me." "What's the plan?" the investigator asked. "We release it slowly," she said. "Piece by piece. To the right people. To journalists abroad. To whistleblower platforms. We expose the rot from the inside." Sam placed a hand on her shoulder. And what about your safety? Adana looked at him. I already died once. I'm not afraid of fire anymore. But that night, as she tucked Emeka into bed and kissed his forehead, something pulled at her spirit. She walked to the window, her heart heavy. A black van sat across the street again. It wasn't unmoving. It was watching. But this time, its lights blinked twice, almost like it knew she saw them, almost like it wanted her to know. We see you too. Adana couldn't sleep that night. The blinking lights from the black van haunted her long after it drove off. It was subtle, but deliberate. It was a message, a warning. She checked on Emeka twice, standing by his crib, listening to his soft breaths. Sam held her hand in bed, trying to reassure her with his warmth. But her mind was somewhere else, her father's voice, the hidden documents, the man who attended the funeral and helped cover a murder. By morning, Adana was pacing the kitchen, unable to keep still. Cynthia walked in wearing her robe, gently sipping tea. You've been up since 4 a.m., haven't you? She asked, setting the cup down. Adana nodded. I need to ask you something, Mama, she said, voice low. And I need you to be honest. Cynthia sat, her expression shifted. I found files in the chapel. From my father. He had proof about the illegal drilling at Block 19. It connects to powerful people, including someone who's now a top government official. Cynthia said nothing. Did you know? Adana asked. She paused. Then Cynthia looked away. I suspected, she whispered. Adana blinked. You what? Cynthia sighed and folded her hands. Back when your father was alive, he was close to Jonathan. They worked together once on a fuel distribution deal illegally. But your father grew suspicious of strange activity around the oil blocks. He told Jonathan he believed money was vanishing through offshore accounts. He feared the wrong people were watching. Cynthia swallowed hard. A week before his death, he sent Jonathan a voice message. He sounded panicked. He said, They know I know. If I disappear, protect Adana. She's all I have. Adana stood frozen. Why didn't this come earlier? She whispered. Because Jonathan swore to protect you, not burden you, Cynthia said. You were only 15. You were broken, lost. He didn't want to give you more pain. Adana shook her head. But I deserve to know. I know, Cynthia said softly, but sometimes love makes us foolish. Tears gathered in Adana's eyes. So much had been kept from her. So much was finally unraveling. And the truth was, everything was far deeper than she ever imagined. That day, Adana sat down with Jonathan in his private study. He already knew Cynthia had told her. I failed your father, he said quietly, looking out the window. I should have done more. I thought hiding the truth would protect you. But now, I see that silence only fed the beast. Adana placed the drive on his desk. I'm not asking you to fight for me, she said. I just need you to stand behind me. He turned, eyes glassy. I always have, Adana. She hugged him, and that moment, for the first time, felt like a transfer of fire from one protector to another. 3 days later, Adana hosted a quiet meeting at a secure location in Lagos, with a small group of international journalists, human rights lawyers, and media whistleblowers. She laid out everything, the files, her father's hidden evidence, the full story of Block 19. This can't be stopped, she said. They'll try to silence me. But if I disappear, let my voice live through every single one of you. One journalist asked, Why now? She replied simply, Because I finally understand, my pain was preparation. But while her courage grew, so did the desperation of her enemies. That night, a security guard stationed outside the Emeka Foundation clinic in the village went missing. The next morning, a note was found on the clinic door. Final warning. Shut your mouth or we'll shut it for you. You won't see the next full moon. The keepers. Back at home, Adana held Emeka in her arms. He played with her necklace, babbling happily. Sam sat across the room, loading news updates on his tablet. Then he paused. Adana, he said slowly. Look at this. She walked over and read the screen. It was a government press release. A new National Corruption Audit Panel has been approved to investigate legacy oil contracts including Block 19. Adana's heart leapt. They were feeling the pressure. Her voice had broken through. But far away, in a dark compound with iron gates, a man in uniform slammed his glass of whiskey against the wall. "She's going too far," he spat. "She thinks public opinion will protect her." Another man replied, "What do you want us to do?" The leader turned slowly. "We finish what we started with her father. And this time, we leave no trace." Rain fell hard that night in Port Harcourt. It wasn't the gentle kind that calms the soul. It was heavy, sharp, relentless, the kind that warned of something coming. The streets glistened under streetlights, and the smell of soaked earth hung thick in the air. Inside the Hilton Conference Hotel, Adana stood backstage, reviewing her final slides. She was minutes away from delivering the keynote address at a global summit on oil, accountability, and energy transparency. This was the moment she'd prepared for. Her speech would mark the first time she would publicly mention Block 19, naming the corruption, the cover-ups, and even parts of the revenue trail tied to government projects. Security was tight. Her detail had doubled, but nothing could have prepared them for what was about to happen. 20 minutes later, Adana took the stage. A large banner behind her read, "Rebuilding Trust in Africa's Oil Sector, A New Dawn." She wore a deep blue suit, sleek, simple, powerful. Her voice rang through the packed hall as cameras rolled. "They killed my father to keep oil money flowing in silence. But I will not be quiet. I will not be afraid, because silence is what they count on. And I am done being counted out." The crowd rose in applause. The video would later go viral across Africa. But moments after she stepped off stage, chaos exploded. It began with a scream from the security lobby. Then a loud bang. Not a bomb, not a gun, but a collapse. One of Adana's personal guards, the youngest, fell to the ground, foaming at the mouth, gasping. The team sprang into motion. "Poison!" one medic shouted. "Call emergency now!" Sam ran in from backstage, eyes wide. "Where's Adana?" She was already being pulled away by two plain-clothed agents, headed toward the back elevator. But Adana screamed, "Wait, what about my guard?" They didn't stop. They couldn't. By the time the ambulance arrived, the guard Chimas, age 26, was gone. Autopsy results the next day confirmed it. A rare neurotoxin, fast, acting, slipped into a water bottle backstage, meant for Adana. Back in Lagos, the mood was cold and sharp. Cynthia couldn't stop pacing the living room. Sam was on the phone constantly, coordinating security. Jonathan sat in his home office in silence, watching the footage again and again, zooming in on faces, movements, timing. Adana, meanwhile, sat in her room with a single candle lit beside her. She stared at the photo of Chimas on her dresser. She had known him for 2 years. He had once told her, "Madam, you remind me of my sister. She died fighting too." And now he was gone because of her fight. The next morning, she visited Chima's family. No cameras, no press, just tears. The boy's mother collapsed at her feet. "My only son," she wept. "He was all I had." Adana knelt and held her. "I promise you," she whispered, "he didn't die for nothing. I will make his life mean something." The mother didn't reply. She just cried harder. Later that week, Jonathan gathered everyone at the mansion's private dining room. Adana, Sam, Cynthia, the head of security, the private investigator. "I've faced federal threats before," Jonathan said. "But this is war." The head of security nodded. This wasn't a message anymore. This was an attempt. Adana stayed calm. "So what's next? Do we stop? Do we hide?" Everyone looked at her. "No," Jonathan said. "We prepare, we strike smarter, and we stay 10 steps ahead." Sam looked concerned. "They're getting bolder," Adana replied. "Then we get louder." That weekend, she appeared on a live international broadcast with CNB Africa. She told the world about the attack. She told them about Chimas. She even hinted at names. And when asked if she was afraid, She said, "I was orphaned. I was homeless. I was nearly cursed to death. But what they never realized is that I've already died once, and when someone dies and lives again, she becomes unstoppable." Far away, inside a black SUV, a man watched the interview. His jaw clenched. "Enough games," he muttered. "We kill her next time." Another voice in the back seat replied calmly, "No, we destroy her first. Break her name, then her marriage, then her movement." They drove off slowly into the night. The sun rose over Lagos, but Adana's world felt darker than ever. Since the attack in Port Harcourt, security had tripled. Every morning started with a full car sweep, every building entry came with metal detectors, and armed guards shadowed her everywhere. But the real war wasn't outside. It was inside government offices, inside her past, and inside people she once called family. The investigator returned that afternoon, face pale, voice calm, but urgent. He dropped a folder on Jonathan's desk. "We found it," he said. Jonathan opened it first. His face stiffened with every page. Then he handed it to Adana. She read slowly. One page, then another, and then she froze. There it was. Her Uncle Ben's signature. Years ago, after her parents' death, he had signed over 3 family lands and 2 shell companies connected to Block 19 to an unknown buyer. And the signature line? Transfer on behalf of minor heir, Adana Okafor, orphaned. She hadn't even turned 16. It was illegal. He had sold what belonged to her and helped erase the trail. "That's not all," the investigator continued. "We tracked down one of the original oil block investors, the man your father trusted as a friend." He handed Adana a photograph. Her breath caught. It was the same man she had seen at her father's funeral. The same one now known as Bernard Egbo, Special Director of Federal Projects, under a new name and a reconstructed image. "He rebranded 2 years after your father's death, grew a beard, changed documents, got help from the keepers to disappear from public records." Adana gripped the photo tightly. Her voice was steel. "He didn't just watch my father die. He helped plan it." That night, Adana sat in the nursery beside Emeka's crib, gently humming as he slept. Sam leaned against the doorway, watching her. "You haven't said much," he said. She looked up. "I've been thinking." "About?" She stood, walked toward him, placed her hands on his chest. "About how they want to destroy us. Our family. My name. Our child's future." Sam nodded slowly. "We're still standing. But for how long?" she whispered. "They're not just attacking me now. They're coming for all of us." Sam kissed her forehead. "Then we stand together." But in the shadows of that peaceful nursery, a camera lens blinked silently from a gap in the ceiling, installed weeks ago by someone on the inside. The next morning, Adana's phone buzzed with an anonymous message. "You love your family? Then don't read tomorrow's headlines." She stared at the screen. Another message came immediately after. "We warned you. We offered silence. You chose noise. Now hear it scream." At 7 a.m., her name was trending online, but not in the way it should have been. Breaking news. Emeka Foundation fraud. Secret offshore accounts. Linked to Adana Obinna. Dozens of fake documents were leaked, claiming she had diverted funds meant for schools and hospitals into personal foreign accounts. None of it was true, but the media storm had started. "Adana, is it true you've been hiding money? Did you use your orphan story to scam donors? Why haven't you responded to the allegations? Was the Emeka Foundation ever real?" Her inbox filled. Her team was overwhelmed. Even sponsors froze project funding within hours. Sam walked into her office mid-morning with 2 phones in his hand. "I've been on back-to-back calls with lawyers, but this is coordinated. Too clean. Too fast." Cynthia sat silently on the couch, one hand gripping her necklace, the other her phone. Adana took a deep breath and stood. "I want a press conference today," she said. Jonathan frowned. "Are you sure?" "Yes. I'm not hiding. I didn't then. I won't now." At noon, she stepped up to a podium. Live cameras pointed at her from every angle. She stood tall, No makeup, no jewelry, just her words. They murdered my parents. Then they stole my future, and now they want to steal my truth. But I am not afraid of shadows, because light always exposes them. She dropped files on the podium, proof of her clean records, screenshots of threats, and whistleblower testimony from a former staffer tied to the keepers. She ended her speech with one sentence: "I was born to burn lies down, and I will do so until truth is the only thing left standing." The crowd erupted. Online, her speech went viral. "We stand with Adana. Expose the keepers. She will not fall." But in the back seat of a black armored vehicle, a phone rang. A voice answered. She survived the headlines. A pause. Then break her home next. 2 days after the press conference, Lagos was roaring with voices in support of Adana. She had survived the poison. She had survived the smear. And now she was rising stronger. But behind the applause, a quieter storm had begun. Not against her company, not against her foundation, but against her marriage. Sam was in the gym of the mansion that morning when his phone vibrated. A single message lit up the screen. "Check your wife's mail, the one she deleted. You don't know who she really is." Attached was a link. At first, he ignored it. But as he prepared to swipe it away, another message arrived. While she was exposing corruption, she was hiding something else. "From you." His hand froze. Then curiosity took over. He opened the link. It led to a series of fabricated screenshots, doctored emails between Adana and one of her legal advisors, twisted to look like a romantic affair. Another batch showed fake documents, claiming Adana had secretly changed her will, removing Sam's name entirely and transferring all assets to a private foreign trust. None of it was real, but on screen, it looked perfectly convincing. At that same hour, Adana was in a meeting with her legal team, finalizing a lawsuit against the keeper's alleged companies. Her phone buzzed. It was her husband, Sam. But she didn't pick up immediately. When she called back an hour later, his voice was off. "You need to come home," he said. Back at the mansion, Sam sat in the living room, holding printouts. He didn't shout. He didn't accuse. He just asked, "Is this you?" Adana read the messages. Her mouth fell open. "Sam, no, these are fake. You know I'd never—" "I want to believe that," he said. "But they're too good, Adana. Too detailed. You think I'd lie to you, after everything we've been through?" "I don't know what to think," he replied quietly. The conversation spiraled. She begged him to trust her. He said he wanted to, but he was exhausted, afraid, overwhelmed. And for the first time since their wedding, they slept in separate rooms. The next day, gossip blogs exploded. Trouble in paradise, inside Adana's marriage drama. Sources claim CEO, husband feels betrayed. Exclusive. Sam Ford, considering separation. It wasn't true, but the whispers were working. The plan was working. Break her name, break her family, then watch her fall. Cynthia stormed into Adana's room with tears in her eyes. "They're inside our walls. Someone fed this to the media. Someone close." Jonathan had already begun combing through the mansion staff. The private investigator found a clue. A security guard's bank account had a deposit of 5 million naira last week made in cash. But the man was already gone. Vanished. Meanwhile, Sam stayed silent. He didn't pack a bag, but he didn't come to Adana's room either. He slept in the guest suite and barely said a word. It crushed her, not because she was guilty, she wasn't, but because the one person who had held her up when she was breaking now wasn't sure where he stood. Then came the final blow. An anonymous email blast was sent to all Emeka Foundation partners. Adana has misused international donor funds. Her marriage is collapsing. She cannot lead with integrity. Several partners froze their funding. A UN program paused collaboration. And just like that, Adana's world began to crack, not from fire or poison or bullets, but from the inside. That night, she stood in Emeka's room, rocking him gently as he slept. Sam stood at the door, watching. She looked up, tears in her eyes. I've spent my life fighting to survive. I've faced devils in suits, demons in shrines, bullets in shadows. But this silence between us, this is killing me." Sam's face softened. He stepped forward. "I don't know what to believe anymore," he whispered. "But I know one thing: they want us apart. And I won't give them what they want." Adana exhaled shakily. "So you believe me?" "I don't believe the lies," he said. "But I need to learn to fight with you, not just for you." They hugged tightly, the weight of betrayal around them, but their love still intact. At midnight, Adana's phone buzzed again. A new message. No name. No image. Just words. "You survived poison. You survived scandal. But can you survive truth?" Adana sat in her office with every curtain drawn and every light dimmed. The message still echoed in her mind. "You survived poison. You survived scandal. But can you survive truth?" It was no longer just about her father, or Block 19, or the past. Now, it was about who she was becoming. Someone powerful. Someone dangerous to powerful people. Someone who could ignite a revolution with just one speech. And the enemy knew it. That morning, Sam made her breakfast for the first time in weeks. "I'm sorry," he said simply, placing a tray beside her. "For doubting. For pulling away." Adana smiled weakly. "They almost broke us, but they didn't," he said. And then he pulled out a small flash drive from his pocket. "What's that?" she asked. "A gift. From someone on the inside." They plugged it into her laptop. Inside were secret surveillance recordings, date-stamped, voice-verified. One showed a private dinner between two top government officials, one of whom had publicly supported Adana's work just a week earlier. But in the recording, he said, "We gave her too much room. She's digging into contracts that don't belong to her. If she doesn't back off, we bring the fire to her doorstep." Another clip showed her Uncle Ben speaking to a foreign contractor. "She's no orphan. She's a problem. I should have finished her when I had the chance." Adana's jaw clenched. They hadn't just stolen from her. They had planned to bury her from the beginning. With Jonathan's help, Adana sent the recordings to international news outlets and global corruption watchdogs. But she didn't stop there. She scheduled a live national address. It was time to speak not just for herself, but for her father, for Chima, who lost his life, for every beggar, orphan, and betrayed soul who was never given a voice. The day of the address arrived. Adana stood at a podium, wearing a simple white dress symbolic, unarmed, full of light. The hall was silent. Cameras streamed across Africa and beyond. And she began. "For years, I was told to be quiet, told I was too young, too poor, too woman. I buried my parents and raised myself. I lost my son and found hope in others. I became a wife, a mother, and a movement. And today, I say this: I will not stop speaking, because truth doesn't whisper. It roars." She paused, her voice calm, eyes fierce. "They poisoned me, lied about me. They tried to turn my home into ashes, but fire can't kill a flame. And this flame, this fight, will not go out." The room erupted. Online, over 5 million people watched live. In Abuja, senators watched in silence. In her village, villagers gathered around radios with teary eyes. She had become more than a woman. She had become a symbol. That night, back at the mansion, Adana stood on the balcony. Cynthia brought her a glass of warm tea. Jonathan leaned on the railing beside her. Below, the city glowed. She whispered, "He would have been proud, wouldn't he?" Jonathan nodded. "Your father would have cried today." Then Emeka ran into her arms. "Mummy, look, stars." He pointed up. She kissed his forehead. "Yes, my love. And one of those stars belongs to your grandpa." But as the camera pulled away from their home, a lone figure stood on a nearby rooftop, wearing a black coat. He watched them through binoculars, then made a single call. "She's louder than we thought. Time to go underground, but we'll wait, because even flames need air. And when she gasps, we strike." A week after Adana's live address, the country was different. People didn't look at her the same way anymore, not with pity, not even just with respect, but with something deeper. It's hope. The girl who had once begged for water at Ojuelegba now had lawmakers quoting her words in Parliament. The orphan who once slept under a leaking roof had become a symbol for every unseen woman, every silenced victim, and every broken survivor rising again. But Adana knew one thing for sure. Symbolism wasn't enough. She had to finish what her father started. In a sealed courtroom in Abuja, her legal team filed the final petition and official call for the criminal prosecution of those tied to the Block 19 scandal, backed by evidence from her father's hidden files, whistleblower testimony, and digital recordings. The case stunned the nation. The headlines read, Block 19 exposed. Adana Obinna files. Federal lawsuit against Egbo. Ben. Others. From tragedy to triumph. Orphan. Turned. CEO sues Nigerian elites over oil crimes. Public pressure mounted. Protests broke out outside federal buildings. Online, her face flooded every feed. But behind the noise, Adana sat quietly in her private office, reading the last letter her father had written to Jonathan. It ended with, "If I don't make it, tell my daughter I see her future, and it's bigger than mine ever was," she cried. But it was the kind of crying that cleansed, not broke. 3 months later, the federal court delivered its ruling. 6 arrests, 4 resignations, 3 lifetime bans from public service. Among them, her uncle Ben. As the press hounded him on the way into the court van, he said only one thing. She wasn't supposed to survive. The keepers, they vanished like smoke. No trace, no fingerprints. But whispers suggested their funding had dried up. And Adana no longer feared shadows. Because she had become a light, no darkness could snuff out. Back home, Sam walked into the garden, where Adana sat under a tree with Emeka and Cynthia. He held up a letter. A private investor just offered full funding for 20 more clinics across West Africa, he said, no strings attached. Adana looked up. Let's do it. Let's give everything we have. Cynthia smiled. You've already given them something more, a reason to believe again. Later that evening, as the sun set over Banana Island, Adana stood on her balcony with Jonathan beside her. They both stared into the horizon. Did you ever think we'd make it here? She asked. I prayed we would, he replied. But you carried the flame. Adana took a deep breath. I think it's time to stop surviving, she whispered, and start building a future. She turned to him. I want to start a leadership academy for orphans. Across Africa, train them to lead. Let the forgotten rise. Jonathan smiled, tears in his eyes. You're not just your father's legacy anymore. You're your own. In the weeks that followed, construction began on the Obinna Legacy Academy. The first brick was laid by Adana herself. Cameras clicked. Drones buzzed overhead. But Adana kept her eyes on the ground, on the children, on the future. On the 1-year anniversary of the day she exposed Block 19, Adana gave her final public speech. Standing before thousands of young girls in matching uniforms, she said, Pain made me, but purpose raised me. I lost everything once, but I gained something greater, a reason to rise every day. Let the world know. We don't just survive. We become light. And light doesn't run from darkness. It consumes it. She dropped the mic gently. The crowd rose to their feet. Chants of, Adana, Adana, filled the air. But she turned to her son, Emeka, and whispered, This is for you, and for every child still walking barefoot, still begging, still dreaming. We're coming for them, and we won't stop. That night, the wind blew calmly through the palm trees of Banana Island. Adana stood by her window, arms wrapped around her son, her husband by her side, stars glowing above her. And far beyond the headlines, the cameras, and the wars she had won, she smiled, not because she was safe, but because now she knew she was free, and the flame she carried would never die. What is your view about this story? Where are you watching from? If you enjoy this story, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories.